Welcome to the Podcast Profits Unleashed podcast on Mintwave Radio and all podcast platforms. If you're a coach, consultant, therapist, or healer with an online program and would like to find out how to grow your business whilst having fun podcasting, go to podcastprofitsunleashed.com/free. Let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome to the show. My name is Karen Roberts, and I help coaches, experts design, create, launch, and grow their podcast to turn it into a sales machine. But today, I'm actually going to be talking about your guest appearances, how to show up and shine if you're going to be a guest on someone's podcast. You see, when I started, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just doing it to the best of my ability. And I was so used to being the host when it came to being a guest on other podcasts, which I only really seriously started doing about 8 months ago. It's really weird. I was so nervous because it was me stepping out of my comfort zone. I felt comfortable being the host. And I thought that what I needed to do was share my bio to put me up as the expert in my field. And when it came to sort of sharing my story as to why I'm doing what I'm currently doing, I thought they needed to almost know that my life story, like that I'd been in the fitness industry for 25 years, 27 years as sport therapist and own a fitness. No, oh my goodness. Now I realize they don't need to know that. It was irrelevant to what it was that I do now. You see, if you're anything like me, you might be thinking that you've got to show up and serve and you've got to give information. But information tells and stories sell. And maybe I just didn't think that I had an exciting enough story to share. But the truth is, everybody has a story. Every story is valid, but they need to be shared so that the right people for you can resonate with that story. And they're more likely to connect with you. So I changed things around. And instead of sending a long bio in with everything that I've done, instead, I simply would say, well, and she helps coaches and experts design, create, and launch and grow their podcast to turn it into a sales machine. That might be it. Or I might add on in there, giving them back their time whilst increasing their income and having fun along the way. Why? Because to me, podcasting is fun. So what I've done in the bio, which is what the host will share with the listeners, they've shared who it is you help and what is the end result that people will get after working with you. So that is really step one. Think about creating your bio in a way that showcases what people will get as the end result after working with you. That's step one. Step two, which is normally around the first question that the host will ask, because it's normally around something about your story. Would you like to share your story as to how you came about doing what you're currently doing, or something like that? Now, this is where you have the big opportunity to share your system origin story, as in, what is it that you do now? And how can you share the story that is in alignment with what it is that you do now? So that if the listeners resonate with this story, they're more likely to come to the conclusion further down the road that you are the right fit for them and come into your world. Now, again, it's a little bit more than just having that story. As I said earlier, information tells, but stories sell. Now, what about setting the scene? Now, before TV came along, it was radio. People would be drawn into the story. And how do they do that? They set the scene. Where were you at the moment in time where you came to the conclusion that something needed to change, which is when you had the epiphany of doing whatever it is that you're currently doing? So when I say set the scene, where were you? Were you sat in your office? Were you at home in bed? Were you out walking? Where were you? What day of the week was it? What was the weather like outside? The more senses you can get involved in setting the scene, the more you're going to draw the listeners in to actually almost relive the experience. So this is you choosing the right story for you. It's got to be genuine. It's got to be authentic. It's just the way you're going to deliver it. So for me, and I get it, some people might think, well, my story isn't very exciting. That's what I thought. Well, my story isn't very exciting, but I still share it. So for me, about a year ago, I was sat in my flat. I think it was a Wednesday. It was about the middle of the week. It was really sunny outside. However, because in the summer my flat would get really hot, I would put the blinds down to stop the sun coming in and warming it up. You know, I lived in the Algarve, Portugal. This is what you do in Portugal or Spain. You shut the shutters to block out the sun so the house doesn't get too hot. However, that just made me feel even more trapped because at that time it was very much feast famine mode. You know, I was very busy, being busy, sliding into DMs, trying to encourage people to jump on a call with me. And more often than not, they really weren't a good fit. So I was busy being busy, but not really very productive. And if ever you've been in that state, I was, even before money had come into the bank, if I knew it was coming, I would mentally spend it. And I was sat behind my computer with coffee in hand. And you know, that notification ding came up on the laptop. You've got an email. And I read it and my heart sank. It was an email from one of my hosts, because I have a podcast network, letting me know that they wouldn't be renewing this year. And I was expecting this money to be in my bank account on the Friday. So I mentally already spent it on the business, not on me. And I just thought, ugh, what am I going to do? This was number 14. 14 of my hosts had given up already. Some hadn't even started. And I realized that, maybe I'd been very naive when I started to just provide the platform, because I wasn't giving them any strategies. There was no process. It was just, there you go. I'd create their channel, create their podcast website, and it was up to them. And they were giving up. And at that time, I wasn't aware of the stats. Now, I've said these stats before in previous episodes because it's actually something new that I'd learned. I didn't realize this at the time, that 90% of podcasters don't make it past 3 episodes. And then out of that 10% that do, 90% of those don't make it past 20. And I could totally relate because this was what was happening in my business. So I knew then that something needed to be done. I needed to change something, because if not, I was going to be bankrupt by the end of the year, because this just wasn't working. Right. So what I've done there is set the scene where I was. I've shared, and okay, it wasn't anywhere exciting when it happened, but it was real. That is actually what happened. So don't be afraid that if it's not some spectacular story, it doesn't matter. Bring them into your story. What could you see around you at that moment in time? What did you feel physically? You know, I said my heart sank. You could say, did you feel it in your gut? Did you feel it in your throat? Whatever it is, bring the audience in to share. Where did you have this feeling? What did you feel? And maybe some of the thought processes that went through your head. And I shared that I realized how naive I was. So you're showing your vulnerability. It's honest. And the reason we don't script this is because it's honest. It's your genuine story. It's then about how you deliver your story. So to include the things that you saw, the things that you felt on a physical level, on an emotional level, to really bring the listeners into your story. So then I was transparent, sharing that I was in fear that I would be bankrupt by the end of the year if something didn't change. And then showcase what it is you did. I said, I got myself a coach, which is what I did. For you, it might be that you decided to go all in and get a degree in XYZ or whatever it was that you did after that moment that was going to change the trajectory into what it is you're doing now. So I hope you're getting this. It's about drawing them in to your story. And then you need to demonstrate what the transformation for you was. So for me, it was after I got this coach, I brought everything into alignment because before that, everything was very disjointed. I had my podcast. It was called one thing. My business was called something else. It wasn't crystal clear to my listeners what it was that I actually did. And so when everything became in alignment, the podcast is called the Podcast Profits Unleashed podcast. It's the same as my website. It's the same as my free giveaway, podcastprofitsunleashed.com/free or /workshop for my workshop. Everything is in alignment. It's crystal clear now to my listeners what I do. What else I did, I got out of my comfort zone and started doing solo episodes because I realized that I had been hiding behind the guest. Because I'm great at bigging other people up, I came to the realization that maybe I was afraid to put myself up there. So I made a decision to change that, and I did. From episode 200, I started doing solo episodes, then an interview, then a solo, then an interview. And we really looked at the format, the structure, the whole process of everything to make it more in alignment and create the content that was going to attract or create my ideal client and then take them on this journey. And you do this through your storytelling. So what happened then for me was within 6 months, my podcast had grown exponentially. And instead of sliding into the DMs and wasting time on social media, dealing with notifications or on calls with people who weren't a good fit, what happened was I started having people coming to me. This is why it's called attraction marketing, but I think I may have misunderstood it somehow. So there, I've showcased my personal transformation once I started changing things. So that's part of my system origin story. So what is it that happened to you? And clearly articulate how things changed for you when you went on this journey. So I hope you can see that by sharing your story, and rather than at the beginning of the episode in your bio, listing all your qualifications and how long you've been in business, rather than you bring it into the story at a certain point, at a point that is relevant to the story. So what happened, where you were when you were feeling your most vulnerable, how you felt physically and emotionally, when you came to the conclusion that something needed to change. When was that critical moment in time? And then what you did. So yes, I said, I've got a coach. For you, it might be that you decided to get some qualifications. And again, now you're showcasing your qualifications and expertise, but for a reason now, because it's part of that story. So then, of course, it will come to how you articulate what it would be like working with you, what your particular process is, how you help X people get Y result. And this is your opportunity to demonstrate what sets you apart from your competitors. When you run your guest appearances in this way, there is no need for a script because it's your genuine, authentic story. And when you format it in a way that will take the listener and move them, turn them into a lead and bring them into your world. Because more often than not, people aren't getting an ROA from their guest appearances. They feel that they need to, it's got to be about them, whereas it's got to be about the listener. Think about everything from the listener's point of view. by you sharing a story that might resonate with them in the current moment, and you've shown what you did to get out of that feeling place or being stuck or wherever you were in that moment, they're more likely to buy into your story. And then when you showcase your particular process that makes it sound easy to the listener to get involved with you, again, you're gently moving them along your sales funnel in a way, because this is really selling without selling. Now, there are more parts to it, but step one is really about getting crystal clear on who it is you help and what is the end result that you promise them. And then building out your system origin story and delivering it in a way that's going to draw the audience in. And I absolutely love this process. So something that I've just recently been doing, and it seemed to be going down a storm, is a power hour. Whatever it is you do, whoever it is you help, jump on a Zoom call with me, and I will go over the complete process of this, because sometimes we can be so caught up in our own head that sometimes all we need is an outsider's view. We need somebody to look at it with a fresh pair of eyes from a new perspective. So I will listen to your story and I will pull out the right one that is going to convert and help you deliver it in the right way. Once we've dealt with your system origin story, I will share with you how to demonstrate clearly your particular process that sets you apart from the rest. Now, this can be done through stories, your story, or a story of your client. Then we need to get ahead of the game and overcome some of the internal limiting beliefs or external limiting beliefs before how you describe your particular giveaway. Because the biggest mistake that so many people make when they guest on podcasts, when it comes to the final question of what should the listeners do next or where can the listeners find you, they want to talk about their LinkedIn profile, their Facebook profile, or jump on a call. That might be a step too far from being a guest on a podcast. So ideally, something that's immersive enough that they get to experience a little bit more as to how it would look like working with you. As coaches, quite often we're by ourselves behind our computer screen and we might be thinking in one way, and it could be just nice to verbalize your thoughts with somebody else. And sometimes that is actually enough for you to come to the conclusion yourself what you need to do and how this will flow. Otherwise, I'll be there to pull the right one. We'll go back and forth so we create this whole process so that you can show up and shine on your guest appearances. Like I said, this isn't something that is scripted. All you need are bullet points so that you can go into one story and then into another story and what you need to cover, no matter what question is asked on the interview, that you need to in some way bring it back to covering everything that you need to cover to get an ROI, to get the listeners to shift the belief in the listener, to give them a new identity that, oh, well, this happened to her and this happened to her client or his client. Well, maybe they can give me this result, and that's what you're looking for. But done in an authentic way, done using your own genuine stories. And like I said, look, my story isn't exciting. I'm sure you've got a far more exciting story to share, and then it's just the way you deliver it. So I hope you got value from today's episode. And I will be back next week with my guest, Dan Banyuk, who specializes in creating new acquisition sales channels for 7 to 8 figure brands. And we're going to be talking about uncovering hidden revenue and the power of YouTube and email marketing. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode on the Podcast Profits Unleashed podcast. If you're a coach, consultant, therapist, or healer who would like to drive sales whilst having fun podcasting, head over to podcastprofitsunleashed.com/free and find out how you can turn your podcast into a sales machine. We'll see you on the next episode.